This is go on.
This is Umar for BoxNation. Ben Shalom wants to do my introduction for me.
I
How are we?
forget where you. I always forget what channel you with. No, I don't forget, but I have flashbacks.
That's fair enough, Ben. I could say the same about yourself, actually, but now you're a real presence on Sky Sports and everything's going well because you're at the party with the Riyadh season. Let's talk about that firstly. Two big fights for Tyler Denny and Joshua Buatsi. Start off with Joshua
Yeah,
Buatsi. God, there's some needle with Willy Hutchinson there, isn't there?
there is. I never see Josh is. If anyone that's ever been around Josh Buatsi, and that he is the nicest gentleman you could ever spend time with. Very intelligent guy, very thoughtful guy, very relaxed. Never gets riled up. But when he does, you know he's got it in him. Like I've talked to him about, what he went through growing up, and he loved to scrap. He loved to scrap, and that's why we got into boxing because he just loved fighting. And so when someone sticks it on him like that, you see the old Josh Buatsi, and you see the Buatsi that you can imagine growing up in Croydon, and someone that just will not be disrespected. And Willy's very good at it. Let's be honest, he knows how to wind people up. We've seen it before, and we saw it again. But it's great, and I think to be honest, it's a dangerous game for Willy because the last thing you want is a wound up Buatsi. But ultimately, Willy has his game plan, and maybe he wants Josh to get riled up. But what a great fight, and the build up's going to be great as well.
Certainly is, and it's a massive fight considering what Willie did in Riyadh last time. It's at Wembley Stadium on a Joshua Dubois undercard. But to be fair, like when you signed Joshua Buatsi, I'm sure Willy Hutchinson wasn't ever in your plans, Ben.
It's come from nowhere, absolutely nowhere, and it's suppose it shows what Riyadh season can do. We were convinced that we were fighting Anthony Yard. I actually thought that that fight could happen on June the 15th at Selhurst Park. That was our ideal plan, and it didn't. And Josh had been very frustrated that it didn't happen. Very frustrated. And but then when Anthony pulls out and Willy Hutchinson gets ordered, Josh wasn't going to give up that position, and the chance to fight for an interim world title is massive. And would it have looked like Willy last year? No, he's had a big win against Craig Richards. Suddenly his name's right in the mix. Suddenly people really believe, and look, there's a lot of people that fancy Willy in this fight. And I don't think that would have been the case 12 months ago. So credit to him. Um, it's a huge fight. Obviously, I'm backing Josh to do the business. I really believe that he can put on a statement on September 25th.
Sure, you'd be hoping the same with Tyler Denny, who goes in as an underdog, but he has done basically in every fight throughout his career, and he's yeah, a real story in British boxing recently. But this is a big, big ask against Hamzah Sheeraz. Would you agree with that?
Yes, but so was Felix Cash, and I know Felix was coming off a long time out, but he was fancy heavily backed in that fight. I've seen Tyler get better and better and better. I'd hate to get in the ring with him now. I know he's had an unbelievable camp. He sent me a message 3 or 4 days ago just to say, Ben, promise you I've got this. He's really confident. He's really, really confident. He's really, really well prepared. He's fought a lot of tall guys recently. River Wilson bent the two fights with him. Brad Ray fight. You're talking tall middleweights there.
Mm.
He's used to that style. I think he's really prepared. He's been so active. I think it's all set up for him to go and shock the world. It really is. Hamza's a lovely guy, and no one can say a bad word about Hamzah. He's a great, great ambassador for the sport. He's a great representative for the sport. He's one of these younger guys now, the next generation of guys coming through that hopefully can be future headliners in our sport. But this is a big test, and it's a great fight, and yeah, it's gonna be unbelievable for Tyler Denny. If you think where he's been, and are we looking at possibly chief support to Anthony Joshua, Daniel Dubois in Wembley with 95,000 people? He's been in small horse shows. He's been the opponent. He's come on to our shows. He's kept winning and kept winning and kept winning. He's now changed his life. credit to Riyadh season, because they have delivered a dream, another dream. And we talk about people's lives changing, and Tyler Denny's life has changed, and he deserves it. But hopefully the journey and the story continues, and he can pull it off on in September.
The two middleweight fights we're getting on the next two Riyadh season bills in Sheeraz and Denny, and Eubank and Zerameta, didn't ever expect these fights, really. I actually think they're both, especially Sheeraz Denny, is a good fight. And I don't think Eubank Zerameta is as bad as a fight people are making it out to be. However, Chris Eubank Jr. Appeals to the wider audience. He goes beyond boxing fans. So we are craving to see him in with a big name. That fight with Hamzah Sheeraz, Hamzah, I know, really wanted that. I know His Excellency liked that fight. Why wasn't that made to your knowledge, Ben?
I think it was before we signed him that those offers were going back and forth. Look, all I could say is objectively, there's a lot more in it for Hamzah than Eubank. Let's be honest. Hamzah's building his name. Eubank is a firmly established, big name in British boxing. And so I'm not surprised every middleweight wants to fight him. It does a lot for your career, but I just think, what sense does it make for Eubank Jr.? You know, he's looking, as every fighter does, at the biggest fights, just as Hamzah is looking at him as his biggest fight. Eubank's looking at others as his biggest fight. He's been a year out of the ring. I appreciate Zerameta is not a name, but he's a tough fighter, and it's a proper test. It really is, and I think it's going to be a great fight. The IBO world title on the line. Of course, it's not the big fights that we expect to see from Eubank in the next 12 months, but obviously delighted to have him back. Will the Hamzah fight ever happen? I think Hamzah's got a lot to do to interest Eubank Jr. in taking that fight, and there's no doubt that he has the ability to do it. Maybe in the next 12 months, if he wins a world title, let's see. But I think people could see perhaps why it doesn't really make sense for Eubank Jr. at this moment.
Ben, if we look at Junior's options, should he come through October 12th? Look, Conor Benn situation still pending. Billy Joe Saunders, I spoke to him recently. He says there are talks going on with Chris Eubank Jr., etc. But again, he's admitted he's overweight at the moment. So you rule out Billy Joe, you rule out Conor Benn. Canelo, you just never know what he's going to do in May, who he's going to want as an opponent. So aren't you then running thin on options?
Look, I said this week, it's one of those big names or it's a world title. As a promoter, I don't want to accept anything less. And I don't think Chris wants to accept anything less. So I believe it could be one of those names. But if it's not, we'll do absolutely everything we can to make a world title fight for Chris Eubank Jr. at middleweight. We obviously know the champions right now. We have had talks before this fight. The talks are still going on. I'm sure they'll continue after this fight. And so, yeah, if it's not one of the big names, I believe he'll be fighting for a world title next.
Just to close off on that, of course, you want Denny to come through on September 21st. If it does go Hamzah's way, we know he's a Riyadh season ambassador. He will be at the show on October 12th. So you know him and Frank are going to be hounding you that week in Eubank.
Yeah, I expect them to stick it on us. I said to Chris, expect it. He could have Billy there, he could have Conor there, he could have Hamzah there, he could have Tyler Denny there. Everyone wants that fight. He's used to it. I expect them to come on hard, especially early next year for that fight. But Chris has his own plans, and we'll see what happens. But both of them have to do the business. Like Hamzah has not got a foregone conclusion, and Chris Eubank Jr. has been out the ring a long time. So let's see what happens. But yeah, I think Chris firmly knows what he wants next, and it won't be Hamzah Sheeraz at this moment.
I forgot a name, and he's actually signed with yourself. And this could be one for maybe a little bit more down the line. But Chris Eubank Jr. has talked about mega fights, and Ben Whittaker is a mega name already, and he hasn't really done much in the ring yet in terms of professional capacity. If we look at like back end of next year, early maybe 2026, that is a big pay-per-view fight on the cards, isn't it? Whittaker Eubank.
It is huge. It is huge. I know people see it and maybe can't quite believe that is being talked about. It's definitely one not in anyone's plans for the next 12 months. But let's see what happens with Ben, and let's see what happens with Chris, because Chris, I expect to finish his career at super middleweight. Obviously, Ben's boxing at light heavyweight at the moment, and they're just two huge big stars, two huge stars in British boxing, and I'm sure not in the next 12 months, but I'm sure that fight or those names will be talked about in 12 or 18 months' time.
Just like Chris Eubank Jr., Tyler Denny, Joshua Buatsi, your boy Ben Whittaker on a Riyadh season bill on Better Bibble on the card October 12th, which is brilliant for himself, and a great domestic clash as well with Liam Cameron. This is a real step up. Before we come on to that clash and what you think of it, speaking to Billy Joe Saunders last week, his man Louis Edmondson, he said that you were at contract stages for Whittaker and Edmondson. Is that correct?
Look, we never signed a contract for that fight. The fight was close. In the end, as a team, we decided that Liam Cameron was the better test, the better fight for Ben's development. But Louis is someone that I am, he's been on our shows a few times. Like I really like the kid, and I think he's got a big future, and I can see how frustrated he is. I think there is going to be news around Louis quite soon in terms of what he's doing. So obviously he'll be frustrated to not get the Whittaker fight. There's going to be plenty of light heavyweights really, really wanting that fight. It's the big money fight. It's already the big money fight in the division, I think, out of anyone. So feel for Louis, but genuinely think he's a good lad, really good fighter. And I expect him to see, I expect to see him on our shows in the future as well. So you never know what happens in the future.
Just to round off, let's come on to the heavyweight division. Again, on a Riyadh season bill, you have Frazer Clarke, October 12th with Fabio Wardley. How close was this, Ben, to not taking place on a Riyadh season card and being a main event live on Sky in the UK?
Very, very close. We were going to do Wardley-Clarke and Azim-Davies on 31st of August. I was so close to announcing that. You're talking days. And then obviously Riyadh season expressed their interest in the fight, and when the money's there for the two fighters that is on the table, it's hard for them to say no. Credit to Riyadh season for putting it on a card like it is. Did I ever think Wardley-Clarke in that could be on an undercard? Never, ever. I mean, it sells out the O2 easy. We pretty much did it the first time. It's a huge fight, and yeah, very close to happening. I do apologize in the sense that I had a lot of people even sending emails into Boxer and messages to me directly about, they would have loved to go to that fight. I encourage, if you can afford it, to get out there on October the 12th Riyadh season, because the card is just unbelievable. So I do understand the frustration that it's not, but just be happy, because look at all the fights that we're seeing, and there's going to be some big nights coming to Britain as well. And I'm sure Frazer after this will fight back in the UK, and yeah, it's part of a massive card on October the 12th.
Let me just chuck some names at you: Joseph Parker, Jilai Zhang, and Ajit Kabayel. All three realistic opponents for Martin Bakole next. Are you happy to say any of them?
Anything, anyone, anything. So great to have a fighter that you're confident in any fight, but literally any fight. And so I expect the Zhang one will be the one, because His Excellency and Riyadh season, I think, have already expressed their interest in that fight. It's a huge fight. I think it's a fight that the fans want to see. And I expect to happen it next, because we're in an era now where the big fights happen and the big heavyweight fights happen, and hopefully it happens before the end of the year.
Okay, great stuff. I can't actually let you go before your big announcement yesterday for Azim and Davis. Hara Davis, well-known fighter, world title challenger, of course. What happened to the Harlem Eubank fight, though, Ben?
We signed for the fight. It was due to happen on June the 15th on the Reactable Crispin and Smith film originally. 10 days after the March 31st Wardley-Clarke date, we found out Adam had an ankle injury. That meant we had to pull out the fight. We communicated to that Harlem and said we'd reschedule as soon as possible. As I mentioned earlier, it was going to go on that August 31st Wardley-Clarke bill. That obviously didn't happen. And then we rescheduled for October the 5th in Brighton, in Harlem's hometown. Did I expect a change in management and a change of heart and wanting to go into a different direction? No. Had we done the artwork and preparing to announce? Yes. And so Adam deserves a huge amount of credit to then suddenly accept Hara Davis, who in many eyes, will represent a more dangerous fight and a bigger name. And so I'm delighted with how it's worked out. It's a huge fight against O'Hara Davies. It's a huge fight for British boxing. And yeah, credit to both guys as well. Credit to O'Hara, because it's a must-win. You know, you're at two different stages of a career. You've got Adam, a must-win given where he's at in his career, and O'Hara give it a must-win given where he's at. And they both fancy it. And it's going to be fireworks. And already I can see the interest in the Copper Box on the 19th of October. It's, you know, you talk about these big domestic nights and the fans being worried about losing them. That is a huge domestic night and one I'm really looking forward to.
All right, and I've just seen you've added a heavyweight fight on that bill October 19th with Jamie TKV and Franklin engaged, just to put the cherry on top of the cake. Ben, appreciate your time, and I'll see you on Joshua Dubois Fight Week.
Cheers, mate.